Question for you. Do you trust the mainstream news media in Canada? No? Well, you're in good company. Because according to the CRTC's own little internal polling, about 3 in 10 Canadians still trust the news media here in Canada. So our friends over at Blacklock's Reporter, they do outstanding work. They do great investigative journalism, and they don't take money from the government, also known as real journalism. They found that the CRTC, which is basically the federal government regulatory wing that oversees what can be broadcasted on TV, and is now, by the way, taking over internet broadcasting as well, okay? The CRTC found that about 32%, 3 in 10 Canadians, trust the information provided by news media in Canada to be accurate and impartial. So that didn't surprise me. I've spent most of my adult life being a journalist here in Canada. But what's really sad is that as a journalist, once you lose trust, you don't really have anything anymore. Because trust is what they bank on. In fact, you'll hear promos often saying the most trusted news in Canada. If you've lost the people, if only 3 in 10 Canadians actually believe what you're saying is accurate, what are we doing here? And those numbers bear out. Like very recent numbers coming from this annual survey that is done on trust. Okay? The language here was important, so I'm just going to read it exactly to you. So, 61% of Canadians believe that journalists and reporters are, quote, purposely trying to mislead people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. That is not a flub. That is not a typo. That's not accidentally mispronouncing somebody's name. That is more than 60% of Canadians thinking that news reporters are deliberately trying to mislead them with things they know aren't true. That's a crisis in journalism. Why do we have a crisis in journalism? Well, the main thing we here at the Canadian taxpayers can point to is the fact that journalists are getting paid by the government. Yeah, so we've got the CBC, which takes $1.4 billion from taxpayers. That's just this year. They take more than $1 billion per year. This year it's $1.4 billion. To put that into perspective, that kind of money could otherwise pay the full-time salaries of about 7,000 paramedics and 7,000 cops. Plus, just this year. So we've got the CBC, which takes all that tax money. But a lot of the rest of the mainstream media are on the federal government payroll now too. Yeah, it's crazy. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going from you, the taxpayer, through the federal government to these media companies. It actually works out based on the companies that are approved government journalists and get government funding. It actually works out to roughly $30,000 per employee. Imagine being a reporter and knowing that 30 grand of your salary counts on that guy's government funding. How are you calling that game straight? You can't. And this is why journalists should not be paid by the government. But we still have a group of people that seem to be big fans of state broadcasters, big fans of government-funded media. In fact, I had to share this with you. This is a little story that was in the Toronto Star recently, and it says that 5 eminent CBC alumni are urging the public broadcaster to deepen its coverage about certain things. What's really interesting is that these 5 eminent CBC alumni are people like David Suzuki and Peter Mansbridge. Okay, so if they truly believe in the CBC, wouldn't they want to free it from government funding? Wouldn't they want to, say, support the CBC with their own money? For real. So we do need to defund the CBC, okay? That's what we need to do, okay? But the people who truly love CBC's coverage and what it delivers for them, those who watch it, they should just pay for it. They can pay for it through subscriptions or telethons or some form of online GoFundMe, right? And don't you think that this is a really good name for a donor group of willing subscribers to the CBC? Eminent CBC alumni. That's a really good group of people. that should be donating their own money willingly to keep the CBC on the air. So, folks, the CBC and funding journalism is a huge waste of taxpayers' money. We're talking more than $1 billion per year now. And it's also a gigantic conflict of interest. So, speaking to journalists out there too, if you want to rebuild your trust, start by not taking money from the government.